Chris McConnell. Mark Wemkin.
Roto Bros signal confirmed.
Chris McConnell, Mark Wemkin, and a very special guest. We got Addison Hayes back here from Dynasty League Football. Addison, I thought the show you did with Chris was so freaking good last week. It almost broke my heart that I couldn't be a part of it. I was out of town. I was attending a wedding. So unfortunately, I had to miss that show, but we decided to run it back. You were more than willing to come back. What's going on, buddy?
Yeah, dude, that show last week was so much fun. I'm so glad that you asked me to come on here and actually do a show with you as well. So I'm super excited for all three of us to, get together and talk some fantasy football here.
We got a lot of extremely opinionated people on this podcast right now, and I could not be more excited. I like to think of myself as one of the most arrogant and opinionated people, not just in fantasy football, but in any aspect of life. When you get me going, I won't stop talking. Somebody else that won't stop talking when you get them going is my partner, Chris. Chris, what's going on, man?
Yeah, good to be here, man. Good to be here. Good to have Addison back. We had just a great show together. Like Mark said, I hated that he couldn't be here with us last week. So, it's good to sort of run it back a little bit and get him on with us too. So a 3-man mic. We haven't done this in a few years. At least it's been 2 years since we first, because this is the third year of the show now. So we haven't done this in, close to 3 years. This is great.
This week in fantasy football has not been an easy one for me. I got to tell you, on top of the disturbing and just absolutely devastating Cam Akers news, the ruptured Achilles. We talked about it a lot on the previous Roto Bros podcast, but I'm heavily exposed to Cam Akers in best ball, obviously, but Dynasty, I have him on almost a handful of teams. Fortunately for me, I have one of these tendencies to where I don't like to handcuff running backs. And Addison, I don't know where you stand on the whole handcuffing running backs debate. I like to kind of increase my team's variance a little bit. If I draft Cam Akers in a startup, I don't target Darrell Henderson. I'm more inclined to target a Tony Pollard or an Alexander Madison, because I'm trying to draft for the best case scenario. I want my team to have the highest ceiling possible. And if I have to sacrifice some median projection by not getting my handcuff, I'll do that. With that being the case, how heavily exposed are you to Darrell Henderson? How are you feeling about where you have Darrell Henderson in dynasty leagues, and how are you valuing him? Are you willing to pay, are you willing to buy high, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. For me personally, my personal strategy is to grab as many priority handcuffs as possible. And that's regardless of if I have the starter or not, because I want those guys, because there's really only a select handful of guys that really are going to take on the primary workhorse mantle if that starter goes down. You named it, Tony Pollard. Latavius Murray, I think, is another one of those guys. Darrell Henderson is now going to be that guy. So there's only a select few of those of actual players that we know will do that. So I want as many of those guys as possible on my team, regardless of if I have their actual starter. Now, I understand in best ball, if you're not taking the priority backup to your already high drafted running back, that just increases your variance. And best ball, I 100% understand that. Dynasty, I think, is a little bit different, because you could be, kind of screwed if Tony Pollard is still playing with Ezekiel Elliott, and then Cam Akers goes down. You don't have Darrell Henderson. Now you have a legitimate hole to fill unless Ezekiel Elliott were to go down. So I love Darrell Henderson. I think that he is going to be really good in this role for the LA Rams. I think that he is going to take on the majority of the workload that Cam Akers was going to receive, both in the rushing and in the passing game. I'm really excited for him, because he was, also a 3rd-round pick in 2019. He was drafted ahead of, David Montgomery. I feel like people forget that he was selected by the Rams ahead of David Montgomery in that 2019 draft. And so I don't really want to justify or explain why the Rams drafted Cam Akers in the 2nd round just a year later. That's all really weird. And of course, I do believe that Cam Akers is absolutely better than Darrell Henderson, but that doesn't make Darrell Henderson bad. So I love Darrell Henderson. I think he's going to be a very solid RB2. I think he has some RB1 upside, especially on any given week, just because of how good that Rams offense is going to be with Matthew Stafford healthy, and Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, and Darrell Henderson is going to have a lot of opportunities to score. And he's going to be really good in the receiving game as well, which we know is very important for running backs for fantasy football. I personally, like, if I in dynasty leagues, if I'm competing, I think I would throw a first rounder at Darrell Henderson. Like if I'm that confident that Darrell Henderson can, just further solidify my chances of being a competing and true championship type team, like not like I need Darrell Henderson to get over the hump kind of team. Like you need to have Darrell Henderson as a solid RB2 or RB3 on your team, in my opinion, just to justify that first round pick in 2022 or 2023. Spoiler though, I have offered that trade. I have offered a 2022 first round pick in one of my dynasty leagues to the Darrell Henderson manager on a team where I believe that I'm competing, and that was declined. So as many people out there want to say, don't go buy Darrell Henderson, don't send a first for him, auto smash any first that you get for Darrell Henderson in an offer, like that was declined for me in my league. So it gives you kind of a broad range of how he's being treated in the dynasty community right now.
I think that's all fair, but you just mentioned trading first round picks and dynasty trades in general, and it just triggered something in my brain. And I forgot that I have a bone to pick with my co-host, Chris McConnell. Chris and I are in a bunch of patron leagues together, and in one particular patron league, we actually just got a pretty big blockbuster trade done. But before that trade could happen, Chris had the audacity, the gall to offer me Jonathan Taylor, Rondale Moore, and Elijah Mitchell for 2 first-round picks and DeAndre Swift. Chris, I want you to take a good, hard look at my face right now. Does it appear as if I was born yesterday? Yes or no?
Wasn't it Michelle Obama that once said, when they go low, we go high, right? Oh, that wasn't fantasy football trade offers? She wasn't referring to that? Okay, never mind then. But no, look, that was actually planned. Like I planned to go high. Like I knew I was highballing you there, or lowballing, however people want to look at it. But like I knew that it probably wasn't going to get accepted. But I did know that after you insulted me on the trade offer, I did know that you were going to counter me on it. So I decided, okay, we'll look at what his counter is and we'll see if we're anywhere close. And luckily, the counter that you gave me on that trade, I was like, you know what? I kind of like that. And I knew the original, I think, was DeAndre Swift and 2 first-round picks for, was it Rondale Moore and Jonathan Taylor? Jonathan
Taylor, Rondale Moore, Elijah Mitchell. Now, Addison, Let me ask you this. We ended up agreeing on 2 2022 first-round picks, a 2022 second, and a 2022 third for Jonathan Taylor and Rondale Moore. Now, I am somebody that is completely for absorbing the first round rookie picks no matter what. However, this is a roster that I believe I probably have the highest probability to win the championship in this particular league this coming year. I've got Josh Allen, I've got Travis Etienne, I've got DeAndre Swift, now I've got Jonathan Taylor, I've got Allen Robinson, AJ Brown, T. Higgins, I believe Derek Carr is my QB2. I've got a bunch of upside at QB3. This is a super flex, by the way. I've got Taysom Hill. So if Taysom Hill is the starter and is the next Konami code quarterback, I've got upside there as well. And then I've got a deep bench. I've got Laviska Shenault on the bench. I've got Rondale Moore on the bench. This team is loaded with upside. Now, tell me first, what do you think of the trade Chris and I made?
I like the Jonathan Taylor side because, I mean, basically, if you want to say that Rondale Moore for a 2022 first is kind of a wash, maybe a little bit more, maybe that, or in the second round pick is kind of a wash. And then you have 2 first round picks or a first and a second round pick for Jonathan Taylor, which I think is a smash easy for Jonathan Taylor. I do definitely agree that that the first trade was a little outrageous, but I like where you guys kind of met in the middle with the counter offers and such, and I like that trade a lot better. But I would take the Jonathan Taylor side of that one out of those 2 sides.
Yeah, and this is for me. It worked for me because now this gives me 3 first round picks next year in a draft that, Mark, you and I in the Roto Bros fantasy advice lounge, like we have talked about ad nauseum. Like the 2022 class is very, very good, at least on paper. And so there's a lot of talent to like there, especially at receiver and quarterback. And there's even some guys at running back to look out for as well. So there's no secret that I love the 2022 class. So yeah, I've got 3 first-round picks now. I've still got, I think it's Austin Eckler and Aaron Jones at running back. Trey Sermon is now, he's going to be my 4th or 5th running back now. So when Trey Sermon is my 4th running back, I'm personally not going to complain about that. I can't remember who my RB1 is in that league, but it's, I drafted them like right after Eckler. So I went like 3 straight guys. But anyway, like I'm perfectly fine with it because I don't value Rondale Moore anywhere near a first round pick. I think he's getting way overdrafted at the top of the second round in rookie drafts, personally, because I don't think a guy smaller than KJ Hamler is going to end up being able to put up, weekly consistent fantasy value week to week in a season long league. I just don't. I think he's more of a DFS flyer in as a tournament play. But so I think that's kind of where it is. So I'm kind of viewing the trade as like Rondale for a 3rd. And then a first, 2 firsts and a second next year for Jonathan Taylor, which I think is great value to get in return for Taylor, because I'm not giving up 3 first-round picks for Jonathan Taylor. At least if I was trading for Taylor. So if I can get 2 firsts and a second, I'll take that.
I promise we're going to get back to talking about the Rams backfield here in a second, but I can almost see it in Addison's face. It looks like he was insulted by what Chris just said about KJ Hamler. And Addison, I want you to know I was insulted too. I don't want to call, I don't think I'd qualify for truther status on KJ Hamler, but he is somebody that I do like I'm not afraid to acquire him in Dynasty. I think he's got a little bit more value in best ball dynasties, which I'm more of an enthusiast of. But even so, I think KJ Hamler is a really good football player, and I think he's got that Will Fuller-esque upside where he can have spike weeks that end up winning you your week a few times a season. I mean, yeah, he's not Jerry Jeudy. He's probably not Cortland Sutton, but I think he's good. So talk to me a little bit about KJ Hamler. I know this is not this is off the rails. This ain't even close to the show sheet, but I could see the resentment in your face when Chris said what he said about Hamler.
Listen, man, that comes from me being a Penn State fan and Penn State graduate. I absolutely love KJ Hamler. Every single week in the 2019 season that KJ Hamler did something amazing, which I'm telling you was every single week. I just tweeted out, I love KJ Hamler. Every single week he did something fantastic for Penn State that was highlight reel worthy. And I just tweeted out, I love KJ Hamler. I love the second round draft capital. I did not love that he went to the Denver Broncos. But I was on board with him literally, I mean, obviously all throughout his collegiate career at Penn State. I was on him through the draft process just because I thought that his analytics were a lot better than what people were giving him credit for. Obviously, the film people probably loved him outside of, he had some hands issues and whatnot, but I feel like most college receivers come in with hands issues, at least of some degree. And then, he actually did pretty well in Denver. I think a lot better than what a lot of people think that he actually did. Like he had 56 targets. He had, almost 13 yards per receptions, 3 touchdowns, played in 13 games. And what's really funny about that is that stat line of 56, 30, 381, and 3, while not all that fantastic, is not totally dissimilar than what like Darnell Mooney put up last year. It was like the volume wasn't exactly slightly there, but like in terms of the efficiency and the touchdowns, it was all, pretty similar to Darnell Mooney. And now Darnell Mooney's the big dynasty darling right now, especially because Anthony Miller got traded last night. So I think that KJ Hamler should get a little bit of some respect, especially in best ball dynasty. I love that call that he's a fantastic guy to have in best ball dynasty. And I don't think he should be the guy that goes he's smaller than KJ Hamler. Right, Chris?
Look, KJ Hamler is 5'9", 178. Rondale Moore is 5'7", 180 pounds. Like this is, and this is a guy that really struggled with injuries. Rondale, not KJ, in college. Okay, and look, 71% of Moore's college yards came after the catch. 78% of his receptions occurred within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. I don't think this is going to be a guy like KJ Hamler. I don't think this is going to be a guy that you're going to be able to rely on to get that sort of volume. And I mean, if we're talking about manufactured touches, which is what Cliff Kingsbury has talked about in regards to Rondale Moore, then we're talking about, okay, he's not even going to be on the field the vast majority of the time. He's going to be on the field when he has touches manufactured for him, whether they're jet sweeps, whether they're handoffs, whether it's wildcat kind of stuff. Like, this is, to me, or wide receiver screens. Like, that's the kind of stuff that Rondale Moore can be good at. But unless he's taken these two wide receiver screens and this jet sweep that he's going to get these 3, 4, 5 touches a game for, 70 yards and to the end zone, like, I just don't think there's going to be a whole lot of volume there for him. So for me, that's what I'm talking about. And look, I like KJ Hamler at Penn State, but these are guys that at the NFL level, there's no way, Addison, that you like KJ Hamler in fantasy. There's no way, because there's no real argument for it, because number one, they don't have a quarterback currently, unless they were to get Aaron Rodgers. Even then, I'd still have my doubts about that, but they don't even have a quarterback that can support 3 fantasy wide receivers. So I think that's, a problem in and of itself as well. These are just not high volume players at that position, especially one that has struggled to stay healthy for so many years in college.
To me, I think KJ Hamler is literally just like 18th or 19th round Darnell Mooney. They're the same build. They've got the same athleticism, similar college production, except KJ Hamler did it against better competition playing in the Big Ten. Where did Darnell Mooney came out of, like, Tulane, right? Where did he come out of?
Oh God, where did he come out?
He was a 5th round pick.
It was Tulane.
It was Tulane.
It was Tulane. But see, he's 5'11". Now he's 175. He probably added some pounds. We're probably looking at maybe 185. So he's 5'11". He's not 5'7" though. Like, there's a huge difference there.
There is a significant difference. But the thing about Rondale Moore being 5'7" is he's the same weight despite being shorter. And you and I have had that talk before. He's a stockier build. He's a stockier build because he's good at different things. I think he can win down the field with his speed, but he's also got the strength and elusiveness to be a little bit better near the line of scrimmage. We've gotten so far off track, like we can't even see the train anymore. I wanted to talk a little bit because Chris and Addison, you guys both, I think, view Darrell Henderson the same way. Addison, you mentioned you'd be willing to pay a 2022 second to acquire Henderson in a league where you're competing. And I don't.
First.
Did I say second?
Yeah, you said second. I'll 100% be buying for a second.
Typically, I don't think I would want to send a 2022 first away for Darrell Henderson, but I think you made a great point by saying, like, if you're competing, like, if you are already a high probability to make the playoffs, but you're in a position where you're looking for a player to send you to the stratosphere, Darrell Henderson does have that upside. I don't quite believe his pass catching abilities from college translated to the NFL, but I've been wrong many times before. So I'm willing to kind of absorb that risk for the upside if my team is prepared for it. I think if you're rebuilding, you could do a lot better in trades than Darrell Henderson. Chris, how do you feel about acquiring Darrell Henderson in Dynasty?
I don't mind acquiring Darrell Henderson at all. Now, I haven't yet made a trade for Darrell Henderson. I don't know that I will. There's a lot of Dynasty and redraft teams where I just took him as a flyer toward the end, past the, right where his low ADP was prior. I don't know where it is now. I'm sure it's skyrocketed since then. As a matter of fact, I think somebody just took him in like the 5th or 6th round, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even earlier than that in that draft, that current draft or that ongoing draft we're in together, Mark. But like, I haven't gone out and traded for him. I'm certainly, and look, I like Darrell Henderson. We all are 3 are in agreement that Cam Akers was a better football player than Darrell Henderson. My thing with Cam Akers was always, number one, I think Darrell Henderson's going to be more involved than everybody else did. And number two, I thought his ADP, taking him ahead of the guys that he was, where his ADP was just it's almost criminal, based on almost not a whole lot of evidence. You know what I mean? And so I could never get on board with Cam Akers. That's why I didn't have a single share. But with Darrell Henderson, I had plenty of shares because I thought at that value, it was hard to pass up whether or not Cam Akers got hurt or not. So I'm not I would not give at this point in time. I probably wouldn't give any more than a second round pick, and that's if somebody's lucky for Darrell Henderson. I certainly would never give up a first round pick, not even in 2023 for Darrell Henderson. If I'm going to give up a 2022 first, I'm not going to do it in July. I'm going to do it in December when it is established that I am on my way to the playoffs, and I would like to acquire another body, or if maybe I need another. Maybe I'm going in the playoffs and I don't have a solid RB2. Maybe my RB2 is like Devin Singletary. Well, nobody's going to be, comfortable with that.
Competing
right?
if your RB2 is Devin Singletary.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, if you're making the playoffs, and your RB2 is Devin Singletary, you must have one hell of a squad elsewhere. But like I said, if I have a player that weak and that unreliable at RB2, then yeah, I'm looking at maybe a 2022 first for Darrell Henderson. It's still a dice roll for me. I'm going to start with a second, definitely. But you know what? It is what it is. If you're that close to tasting the title, then in that case, I can certainly make an argument for it.
That's why I was willing to give you all of my 2022 draft capital to acquire Jonathan Taylor, mainly because, running backs have such a short shelf life. Their age apex is lower than a wide receivers, a quarterbacks, and what have you. So I was willing to basically forego the entire 2022 rookie draft in this league to go all in on a championship, because my window, it could be closing. Allen Robinson's getting a little older. Who else do I have on that team? I've got a lot of question marks between Brian Edwards, Laviska Shenault. I still have a bit of a problem at QB2. I've got ambiguity there, but I was willing to, forego the 2022 draft to absorb the upside that is Jonathan Taylor. And I think the principle is the same with Darrell Henderson. If you feel that you are like that close to being the best team in your league, trade that first round pick. Don't give up more than a first round pick, but trade that first round pick and absorb Darrell Henderson's upside, because there is still a range of outcomes where he could be a receiving back just like he was in college at Memphis. Memphis is something in terms of college football prospects. We just saw a Memphis alum in Anthony Miller get traded. This guy was a hyper producer at Memphis, and he's done nothing in the NFL. That is Anthony Miller I'm talking about. So I want to talk about something that might be a little more difficult to break down. And this is something that I don't think any amount of good fantasy football analysis can make you more right or more wrong. This is strictly a gut thing, and that is, Addison, are you willing to try and trade for Cam Akers in Dynasty right now?
I'm not actively going out and trying to buy Cam Akers. No, because I listened to, so this is on DLF's YouTube channel. It's Mannequin Chill. It's Scott Connor and Shane Manila, two fantastic DLF people that are really super smart when it comes to Dynasty and maneuvering trade markets and strategy and all that stuff. So I was listening to that show, and they talked very in depth about going out and trading for Cam Akers, because that is a pretty hot topic right now, is that the potential to buy low on a 22-year-old running back, right? And even with the Achilles injury and whatnot, and we know the history of Achilles at running back. And while I don't think a lot of the running backs apply to Cam Akers' situation, it's certainly not an ACL anymore. Like, the Achilles is a whole different beast than an ACL that we've seen, numbers of running backs come back from. But they talked about, and I kind of echoed their sentiment, that while it might be nice to buy low on Cam Akers now, maybe you throw a second round pick or something like that at the Cam Akers manager and you get him for that price. It's going to be hard to ever get that type of value or get better than that value later on down the road. Because let's say in the best case scenario, Cam Akers does return in 2022 and he is in some sort of a committee just because Darrell Henderson, produced pretty adequately in 2021. Cam Akers is kind of being slowly brought back into the fold with an Achilles injury that we know, inhibits players even after, when they're fully healthy, they're never really fully healthy. So he's in some sort of a committee. He's not getting the workload that he was projected to get this year in 2021. That just becomes another running back, right? He becomes at that point, like a Ronald Jones or a Leonard Fournette or a Mike Davis or a Myles Gaskin. These are all players that, might be fine, but you're never truly going to get a true ceiling or upside with those guys. And thus then the value and your return on investment in a future trade isn't really going to net you all that much back on that second round pick that you offered. Or, if you can sell Cam Akers right now for a first round pick, that's 100% auto sell. I don't even think there's any question. There's no scenario where you should not be accepting a first round pick for your Cam Akers share right now. So that's kind of how I feel. And I really thought that was like such smart thinking from Scott and Shane, because they were like 2022, he's going to be 23 years old coming off of Achilles injury. Then he's fine in that year. Maybe he has like 800 receiving yards, another 800 rushing yards, 200 receiving yards. He's fine for fantasy football. Then 2023, he's 24 years old with an Achilles injury. We're not talking about second contracts. It just, all that timeline for him as a running back just really kind of catches up quickly for his dynasty value, that there's going to be a lot of other players that you're going to want to rather have than a 23, 24-year-old Cam Akers coming off an Achilles injury. And that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is he doesn't really come back at all. And maybe he is Devin Singletary. Maybe he's Zach Moss. Maybe he's the RB2 in a committee, right? Maybe he's like a worse version of Kareem Hunt or something like that. So that's just, there's a lot of variables, and you should be absolutely trying to sell Cam Akers right now. But also, I'm not actively going out and buying Cam Akers unless it's like super cheap. Like I saw somebody sell like Ramondre Stevenson and a third. They sold those two players for Cam Akers, and I thought that was obviously pretty cheap. I would take the risk on that. But more often than not, I feel like the Akers managers are asking for too much, or they're not willing to part with that as of right now, because his value was kind of killed because of that injury.
Unless I can get a first round pick for him, I'm not trading him. And like I said at the beginning of the show, he's one of my highest owned players in Dynasty, right next to Jalen Hurts and DeAndre Swift, AJ Brown as well. But I'm not trying to sell. Number one, because the rehab process for a professional athlete has some variance to it. We've seen guys come back from the ruptured Achilles before. They weren't running backs. We've seen Demaryius Thomas come back from it, Emmanuel Sanders, and of course they did it at much older ages, where at a position where explosiveness is still extremely important. We just recently saw Kevin Durant in the NBA come back from a ruptured Achilles, and he was still every bit as good of a player as he was. Now, explosiveness might not be, or raw athleticism and explosiveness might not be as important to Kevin Durant playing basketball as it is to Cam Akers playing running back in one of the most violent sports in the world. However, I think I'm willing to place a bet on Cam Akers, at least on the teams where I already have him. I'm not going out and I'm not trying to fleece other owners on buying Cam Akers. Mostly because number one, it's insulting. I know people with Cam Akers are probably a lot like myself, where we fell in love with the dude as a prospect. So I'm not actively selling, but I'm also not actively buying him. Where I have him, I'm willing to bet on him rehabbing the injury the way he's supposed to. He's not pushing himself too quickly. Now, I've told Chris before that I have, my best friend is a licensed athletic trainer. My girlfriend is a licensed athletic trainer. They deal with sports injuries for a living. And I've kind of got them in my ears saying like that there is variance to this. Some of these players probably didn't come back, number one, because they gave up, or number two, because they tried to come back too early and it ruined their progress. That's why you see some of these guys come back from the injury and are every bit as good as they used to, and it ends other guys' careers. Chris, how do you value Cam Akers now? Are you willing to buy him?
Absolutely the hell not. Because this is, and the fact that you can sit there with a straight face and say that you are not going to get rid of Cam Akers for any less than a first round pick is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Because here's a list of running backs who were on an NFL roster when they suffered a ruptured Achilles over the last 20 years. Okay. Lindale White was 26. Ruptured his Achilles, out of the league. Andre Brown, out of the league following 2013. Mikel LeSure, who we talked about the other day. Mikel LeSure, by the way, was on his way to becoming what's likely to be the franchise running back for the Lions. His rookie season touched the ball about 250 times, almost 800 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, was targeted in the receiving game 49 times. So it's not like he wasn't involved in the receiving game either. It's not like he was a one-trick pony of a running back or one-dimensional. Ernest Graham, out of the league after his injury in 2011. Kendall Hunter, a lot of people had high hopes for him. He only played 2 more games after 2013. Beanie Wells suffered an Achilles injury in 2013, never played again. Vic Ballard in 2014, out of the league, never played again. Arian Foster was cut mid-season, and then he was out of the league after that. Brandon Oliver, 2016, out of the league following his Achilles in 2017. Deontay Foreman in 2017, he played 1 game in 2018, and he's out of the league in 2019, 6 games in 2020. Isaiah Crowell out of the league in 2019, and Marlon Mack, we have yet to see how that's going to work out. But obviously, history does not bode well for any running back, no matter what the age, coming back from a torn or ruptured Achilles. So I would highly suggest, Mark, that you change your tone on that and decide to sell Cam Akers. And absolutely not, I'm not buying Cam Akers at all, because Addison just talked about it. This is a team that we just talked about who drafted Darrell Henderson, and then immediately the next season drafted another running back. So what if Darrell Henderson, one of 2 things is probably going to happen. Darrell Henderson is going to come out like gangbusters and establish himself as the franchise running back. And then that's all she wrote for Cam Akers, more than likely. If he doesn't, they're going to be under more pressure in this win now Matthew Stafford era to draft another impact running back early on in the draft in the first 3 rounds, more than likely. And all of a sudden now you have another body in that backfield to compete with Cam Akers. So there's no story here that seems like it's going to end very well for Cam Akers. There's no redemption stories for running backs. Marlon Mack could be the first, but guess what? Now he's got Jonathan Taylor to worry about. And he had a decent season before they drafted Jonathan Taylor. Running back is the biggest revolving door in as far as a position in sports, in almost all of sports, and definitely the most revolving door in football, because they're so easily replaceable and so cheaply replaceable. So I don't see a puzzle fitting together where Cam Akers is worth anything in next season. So there's no way in hell that I'm getting everything that I can for Cam Akers now, and I'm sailing that ship off to sea forever. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about that backfield at all, unless Darrell Henderson comes out, like I said, like gangbusters and just ignites that backfield himself. But other than that, I'd rather just wait to see who they draft in 2021 or 2022.
See, I don't think they're a lock to draft another running back in 2022, mainly because, as you said, running back is a revolving door. This team is going to have other holes. Yeah, their offensive line is good, but they've got one of the oldest offensive lines in the NFL. And if they want to make something of what you just deemed the Matthew Stafford era, they're going to have to relegate some draft capital to other positions. I don't think they have the draft capital in their pocket to waste on another running back. I think it's going to be important for the Los Angeles Rams to rehab Cam Akers and make him into what they drafted him to be. I think he's going to get as many chances as humanly possible as the Rams are willing to give him, mainly because of just the state the team is in. The team is old. They've got a lot of dead money in contracts, and they're just not in a position to absorb another running back with high draft capital. They can't do it. That it would absolutely tank the team in my eyes. So I got this gut feeling that Cam Akers is going to get an opportunity to be this team's primary back in 2022 if, and that's a big if Darrell Henderson does not take the job and run with it. So on one hand, I'm willing to bet on Cam Akers, the prospect, Cam Akers, the athlete, Cam Akers with the multi-purpose skill set. I'm also at the same time willing to bet against Darrell Henderson seizing the primary back role.
Okay, look, if you're somebody out there listening, I'm not going to, my stance will not change. History is obviously, Cam Akers is going to have to make history. Like, he's literally going to have to make history in order to make this work. So I'm out completely. But if you are somebody who is not going to listen to me and you're going to say, you know what, screw Chris, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trade for Cam Akers, I beg of you, please don't do it right now. Don't do it while it's fresh and heat of the moment and on the minds of these people. Think of the that's what I like to do, and I've talked about it before on the show, Mark. I like to think of the psychology behind the game. Because there is a psychology behind it. Okay, it's fresh on the minds of everybody. Wait until week 9, week 10, week 11. Let's see if Darrell Henderson has established himself as this alpha dog in the backfield. If he has, you don't want to give up a first-round pick for Cam Akers. Dear God. So don't do it in July, a week after it happened. Okay, do it. Wait till deep in the season where we have a more clear answer of where this backfield could go in 2022. And in that case, you know what? I won't say nobody, but a very small amount of people are probably going to be willing to still give you a first-round pick for Cam Akers. Look, but if you can get him for a third-round pick in week 11, okay, maybe I can. That's a pill that I can swallow. Not at the end of July. I just can't, because so much is undetermined. Why would you give up a first-round pick when we don't even know what Darrell Henderson's going to end up doing? Just wait on it. Put it on your to-do list. Ask Google to set a reminder for you. I don't know. Do what you need to do, but don't do it right now.
So I think there are a few things that I was thinking about whenever I was hearing both of you guys talk, and maybe I can try and sum it up a little bit for any of the listeners out there, because I think that there are a couple points to each of your guys' credits that make a lot of sense. Number one, I think that Cam Akers, while he might not have history on his side, I also don't think that using a 29-year-old Arian Foster who wasn't getting a lot of run in Miami before the Achilles injury is a fantastic comp and good example for why Cam Akers can't come back. I think Mikel LaShore is definitely probably the best running back example of what we have in terms of projected career trend and overall just like stranglehold on a starting position. Deontay Foreman sucked. Marlon Mack, I think, will be really interesting. And if Mack actually does go out and have, a solid game or two instead of Jonathan Taylor, like if JT gets hurt, Marlon Mack has a game of 15 carries and 70 yards and maybe scores in some fashion or not over the course of a game or two, that's going to look really, really good for Cam Akers. He's also, again, like I said, 22 years old. He has now 14 months to recover. It's not like this happened in October where he's now pressured to try and come back for the 2022 season. He can rehab this entire rest of this year all the way through next summer into next September, 14 months there. So I think that if there's anybody that I would put my chips on to come back from this type of injury, I think it would be Cam Akers. But again, I think that is not really saying a whole lot, because I think that he returns and he's at best probably like a committee back, like a Ronald Jones, like I was saying, because I do think that Darrell Henderson can make some sort of impact on this team. But then to Chris's point as well, I don't like Mark, I want to say that, most NFL franchises are pretty smart and that they see other holes in their team and they want to address those positions and those needs in the NFL draft. But the LA Rams has been a team that they made a questionable draft pick in the second round with Van Jefferson at wide receiver. They drafted Darrell Henderson in the third round, Cam Akers in the second round the year after. This year, for some reason, they spent a second round pick on Tutu Atwell. And they've been trading their first round picks for every single year for the past 5 years. So in my opinion, this isn't really a team that I would expect to make the smart or the best move for their franchise to fill an immediate hole in the first couple of rounds and stuff like that. So I could see a situation where, like Chris said, if Cam Akers isn't rehabbing well, Darrell Henderson didn't take the job over in 2021, that they could just turn right around and be like, you know what, we need another running back because we drafted Tutu Atwell in the second round last year and that didn't really work out for us. So now we need some more firepower on this offense because our running back position is a little scarce right now. So I think that there's multiple points to both of y'all's arguments that definitely work out. And I think it's just a really weird and fluky situation. And ultimately, I think, in my opinion, people just are going to have to decide what they truly believe about Akers and the Achilles injury and the Rams, future outlook just as a team and what they could do. You just got to have to sit there and toss all that in your mind and see what comes out the other end. And then that ultimately makes your decision for you. Oh, I will say, last thing. because this was the final point. I do agree with Chris. If you want to buy Cam Akers, wait until halfway through the season, because people in Dynasty are just going to see this dead asset in Cam Akers sitting at the back end of their Dynasty rosters, not doing anything, not contributing at all to their team. And you could literally throw them, like you could throw them a backup running back to their starter that went down in week 8 and is now out for the rest of the season. Like, you know, if like I would have used the Giovanni Bernard example for Joe Mixon, but Gio's not on the team anymore for Cincy. But I, like that type of a running back, you could throw and be like, here, I'll give you this in like a 3rd round pick for Cam Akers, because at least that does something for you. That helps you. And Cam Akers isn't doing anything for you. So now you can take on that dead asset in season in Cam Akers that won't do anything for you, but you're comfortable in doing that. And you might get him at a slightly cheaper price just because people put more priority on their actual in-season points and needs. And so I do agree with that, with what Chris was saying.
I think you made a ton of great points there, and I really appreciate you acting as the mediator when Chris and I start going at each other. It's kind of like you got out ahead of that, and you were like, you know what, this is about to get ugly. I'm going to calm these guys down before they ruin the entire podcast. Chris and I have ruined some great podcasts by not being able to get along or agree on something. And something that we have a tendency to just be worlds apart on is wide receivers. And wide receivers in Dynasty, especially, like, for example, I consider DJ Moore to be one of the most obvious buy lows in Dynasty. Like, any position, it doesn't matter. DJ Moore to me is just screaming, buy me low. Buy me low. All I've done is produce the last 2 seasons. I've got 2 1,200 total yard seasons over the last 2 seasons, and I've done it with broken Cam Newton, Kyle Allen, and who else was playing for them? Like, Teddy Bridgewater, all he's done is produce. And that to me is quarterback proof. If this guy can give me 70 or 80 catches and 1,200 yards with literal garbage at quarterback, I'm willing to buy him in an ambiguous situation, especially with somebody who is a perceived gunslinger like DJ Moore. So there's one example. Addison, who are some wide receivers that are like an obvious buy low to you and nobody else is talking about?
Well, I made a video for this for DLF's YouTube, is 3 wide receivers that I want to go out and buy right now, or at least, you know, try to target in Dynasty startups. One of those guys that I'll specifically highlight here is actually on the list that you put on the show sheet, is Cooper Kupp. I think it's egregious that Cooper Kupp is being drafted outside the top 30. And it's actually funny because he and Robert Woods are both kind of valued similarly for Dynasty, just because they're a couple years apart, but they produce kind of ish similarly. Even though they score in different ways. But Cooper Kupp, to me, I think is a fantastic buy low right now, because you can get him at such a cheap wide receiver, low end wide receiver 2 or even wide receiver 3 price, because people have just kind of casted him aside based on what he did last year. And we forget that he finished as a top 5 wide receiver in 2019. I think Matthew Stafford is going to be fantastic for Cooper Kupp. I think he's also going to be fantastic for Robert Woods. But this could be, a situation where we have like a Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay situation where both of them are fantastic, or like Golden Tate is to Robert Woods and Marvin Jones is to Cooper Kupp just a couple years ago in the Detroit Lions offense, where both of those guys were wide receiver 1s in fantasy that year. So I absolutely love both Rams wide receivers in Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp is fantastic because he's going to be, I think, slightly cheaper than Robert Woods, because everybody seems to be like, oh, Robert Woods is perennially disrespected, go out and buy him. That's like ingrained into our minds. But nobody seems to really be talking about the other guy on that team, and Cooper Kupp, and how much of a buy that he also is, in my opinion.
Yeah, Robert Woods, at least over on Underdog, his ADP is shot up into the 3rd round. So I kind of agree with you in the sense that while everyone talks about Robert Woods being the most underrated receiver, and I don't even think that's wrong from like a real NFL perspective, he's not really underrated in fantasy anymore. He's being drafted as a high-end wide receiver 2, and that's pretty much what he's been, either a low-end 1 or a high-end 2. But I'm glad you highlighted the Rams receivers. Chris and I talked them up on the last podcast we did. Cooper Kupp especially, even though he's, I believe, 28 years old, he's got one of those skill sets that tends to stick around in the NFL for a really, really long time. He can make plays after the catch. He kind of puts himself in a position where he isn't being destroyed over the middle very often. And, he's on a team that believes in him. So I couldn't agree more on Cooper Kupp. Robert Woods, I think you made a great point on as well. Chris, same question, man. Who is a wide receiver in Dynasty that you think is just an obvious buy low?
Well, as always, I'm going to add a little bit more than what I should. So I'm going to give you three: DJ Chark, Michael Pittman, and Jerry Jeudy. I think all three of them are being disrespected. I think obviously Jerry Jeudy's, and I think we touched on Jerry Jeudy a little bit on the last show. That we both like him moving forward, and we think he's a little bit of a buy low. Like everybody, it's obvious why Jerry Jeudy is a buy low right now, or why people are disrespecting him. Cortland Sutton's coming back. They haven't they haven't solved the long-term quarterback problem. They don't have Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson just yet. We'll see what happens there. If they do, obviously his stock's going to skyrocket. But right now, like this to me, I think he could absolutely be the number one receiver for this team. And I love both of these guys. And I think they both could be the number one guys. But Jerry Jeudy to me is going to be a guy that is going to be, going to be the higher volume player. He's not, a guy that's going to run a bunch of 9 routes and is going to be, have a high, ADOT, like Cortland Sutton is. That's going to be the Cortland Suttons of the world and the Kenny Galladays of the world. And, guys of that nature. It's not going to be guys like Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy is a precise, pristine route runner, already one of the best route runners in the entire league. And he's a chain mover. And that's fine. We've seen guys like, Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams make their names as these guys that are, big bodied, receivers who are not real downfield Kenny Galladay-esque threats. They are big, strong chain movers. Now, Jerry Jeudy is not of the body mold of Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams, granted, but he's still that sort of volume mold of a receiver. So I think he could be solid. Michael Pittman is more, speaking of Kenny Galladay, he was my number one Kenny Galladay comparison was Michael Pittman last year. And so Michael Pittman has got that size, speed, alpha combo, that profile we look for. And they don't really have that in Indianapolis outside of Michael Pittman. So Pittman is in an obvious situation. If they can, obviously we've seen what Carson Wentz has been able to do behind a good offensive line. So if he can be protected and he and Frank Reich can find that chemistry in the play calling and in the offensive gameplay, Michael Pittman, I think, has nowhere to go but up. And of course, DJ Chark is playing now with a generational talent at quarterback, and he's the number one receiver for that team. The speed size combo is hard to ignore. I mean, look, if the quarterback was Teddy Bridgewater, I'd probably be a little bit colder on DJ Chark. But there's a big difference between Teddy Bridgewater and Trevor Lawrence, and I think Trevor Lawrence is going to really like having a guy like DJ Chark.
See, out of the three guys you just mentioned, I think Jeudy is difficult to buy. I would agree. If you can get him low, you do it, because Jeudy commanded 113 targets last year. Yeah, Cortland Sutton wasn't there, but to command that kind of target share and the air yard share that he was able to draw, even on such a slow, stagnant offense that wasn't able to do much of anything, even somebody like Teddy Bridgewater could end up being a QB improvement for somebody like Jerry Jeudy. It might even help that Cortland Sutton is back and he no longer has to show up against or go up against alpha cornerbacks. So I'm with you on Jeudy. I just think he's a little more difficult to buy. Michael Pittman, however, you and we're on the same page here. Addison, I need you to talk Chris and I off of Michael Pittman just a little bit. Otherwise, he's going to end up on all of our rosters.
I don't know if I can. I mean, Michael Pittman is also a fantastic buy low. I've been looking at him and thinking about doing some content around Michael Pittman because I do like his situation. I like Carson Wentz coming in. It's an upgrade over Phillip Rivers, at least in where Phillip Rivers was at his point in his career when he played in Indy. Wentz is going to throw the ball, and T.Y. Hilton, I don't think, he's still solid, but he's not old T.Y. Hilton. He is old T.Y. Hilton, but he's not like old T.Y. Hilton of 2014. So Michael Pittman, I think, can definitely come in and basically command wide receiver 1 targets from Carson Wentz in the offense. So I do like Michael Pittman, and I don't really know if I can talk you guys off the ledge all too much, especially because he's super cheap right now. I feel like he's just kind of forgotten about from the 2020 wide receiver class. And while he's not I feel like he's not as low as Jalen Reagor, because Reagor super disappointed last year. Pittman just kind of was okay, but he wasn't T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, or even Chase Claypool enough to where he's getting all that hype. Pittman is just kind of chilling down there at like wide receiver 50. And that's super cheap, in my opinion, for a player who I think could be a pretty solid flex play at worst, and maybe even find your way into your roster and as a wide receiver 3 and start 3 leagues, or maybe wide receiver 2 if Carson Wentz actually does pan out to be somewhat of what we saw him do in Philly.
Michael Pittman is good at those things that Carson Wentz is good at. In the sense that Wentz has one of the biggest arms in the NFL. He's never been very good at intermediate passing. That's not where he's good, and that's pretty stable. We know that Wentz is not a great intermediate or even short passer, but with one of the biggest arms in the NFL, I don't think you could have paired Michael Pittman with a quarterback that more suits his skill set unless you gave him to Mahomes, Stafford, Kyler Murray, just somebody with an absolute hose. So I like the Wentz acquisition for Michael Pittman. Pittman is one of those size speed monsters that we talked about, 6'4", 223 pounds, great athleticism. I think the Galladay comparison is fantastic. All right. One other receiver that I really want to talk about, because I listen to fantasy football content all week long. I work in construction, and I've always got a podcast on in my ear, it doesn't matter who. If you make fantasy football content, I probably listen to it. And I never hear anybody talking about Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is 25 years old. He's already broken out, and he plays on one of the most pass-heavy offenses in the NFL. Is there something I'm missing here, or should Godwin just be an ultra easy buy?
Easy buy, 100%. Like if you wanted to talk about, and make a better case for a slightly better case for Jerry Jeudy than what Chris talked about, was the Denver Broncos receivers in Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are like a lighter version of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, right? Like they kind of both fill those roles pretty similarly. Obviously, the difference between Drew Lock and Tom Brady is like night and day, like the difference between Tom Brady and me. So like that's pretty rough. But no, Chris Godwin is fantastic, and I think that people forget that he was actually really, really good in the games that he played last year. Just was missing time because of injuries, and I don't know if people are also concerned about Antonio Brown coming in as the wide receiver 3. Now he has a full offseason in this offense with Tom Brady as well. But over the second half of the season, when Antonio Brown was playing, all 3 of those wide receivers were getting over 8 targets per game. And Tom Brady was absolutely fantastic. This is the first year in 21 years where Tom Brady had to learn a new offense. And it's been historically noted how hard, Bruce Arians' offense is to learn, especially in that first year. We saw it with Carson Palmer with the Arizona Cardinals, where Palmer came in, was not that great in year 1. And then year 2 had that big explosive leap in production. So Tom Brady, as good as he was last year, could be even better this year with a full cast of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown. So I think that offense is going to be super productive. And Chris Godwin, I think, is going to be a big reason of that. And like I said, over 8 targets per game is going to be fantastic each and every week. And it's really just going to come down to touchdowns. Who's getting the touchdowns out of those 3, and Rob Gronkowski, and then the running backs. But I think, on a week-to-week basis, if you love DJ Moore, you should also be loving Chris Godwin as well.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I'm not big on DJ Moore, but I love Chris Godwin. So I'm looking at some of the guys that, Chris Godwin is going around. So draft wise, I think, if you're talking about buying him and drafting him in Dynasty, you got to kind of look at the guys that he's going around, right? So let's ask ourselves the question: are we taking Chris Godwin over, Cooper Kupp? Yeah, I mean, at least I am. Are we taking him over Adam Thielen? Long term, yes. This year, no. DJ Moore, absolutely. Deontay Johnson, yes. Lockett, yes. Galladay, yes. Jamar Chase, no. So I'm looking at all these guys, and there's only one name here that that I'm saying no to, and that's Jamar Chase, or that I'm saying no to taking Chris Godwin over, and that's Jamar Chase. Now, CeeDee Lamb's going wide receiver 12. Godwin's going like wide receiver, 18. It looks like. So I mean, if you want to account for that sort of, 5-6 spot variance, that's fine. I'll take CeeDee Lamb over Chris Godwin, of course. But other than that, Amari Cooper sitting there, that's maybe a coin flip with Dak back. But, 25 years old, look, are we going to, and you're talking to a guy that in dynasty startup leagues, I'm punting my second quarterback in drafts a little later so that I could just get Tom Brady as my QB2. Why? Because that's at least two. We already know we're getting at least 2 years out of Tom Brady. So that's 2 more years I can spend looking for Tom Brady's replacement if and when it is 2 years, that he's gone. So I'm looking at it as like in 2-year intervals. Yeah. Can I rely on Chris Godwin and be happy with the situation, the quarterback that he has and the offense that he's in? Absolutely. For the next 2 years, sign me up. And the only receiver going in that entire list of guys that's going around him, I'm only taking Jamar Chase over him. So look, I mean, is he going to have weeks where, maybe he doesn't see a whole lot of targets and maybe he does kind of have a poopy week? Yeah, probably. He'll probably have 2 or 3 of those during the season. But, you can point to almost any wide receiver that's not a top flight wide receiver 1 and say the same thing. So I'm happy if Chris Godwin is my wide receiver 2. You could do a lot worse than that. And I'm thrilled to have him as my wide receiver 2. So I think we're all 3 on board there. He's a buy in redraft. He's a buy in dynasty.
Yeah, I think something that's really important with Godwin too is, Chris, there's a lot of people that are deploying the process that you are with Tom Brady. And I think they're also doing it by acquiring Brady in a trade, because you could probably trade for Brady very cheap right now. You might be able to throw a 2022 second round rookie pick at somebody for Brady, and they'll look at his age and be like, all right, it's time to get out on Brady. So you could probably get him, and then you've got at least 1 year, maybe 2, like you said, of stability at your QB2 or superflex position. If you are one of those people that owns Tom Brady in a superflex dynasty league, I think you owe it to yourself to go and trade for Chris Godwin. We talked a little bit earlier about increasing your variance, and stacking Brady with Godwin would do that. The only thing is, Godwin is going to give you so much more lifetime value in a dynasty league than Mike Evans or Antonio Brown would. Addison, do you have any more receivers worth of note that you would be willing to buy low on right now in dynasty leagues?
I was currently looking to see who owns Tom Brady in one of my dynasties.
Yeah, if you have Tom Brady in a dynasty league, you got to go and trade for Chris Godwin, especially if that team is competing. I think it's really, really important to get that stack. That stack is going to be great this year.
Yeah, I absolutely love that call. And I love having Tom Brady in dynasty still. I love Chris Godwin. Another wide receiver that I would pick to trade for or acquire right now, I'm actually going to go really, really low down the totem pole for fantasy wide receivers. And I'm going to give you who I believe could be the wide receiver 1 for the New England Patriots in Jacoby Myers.
Yes.
I think Jacoby Myers is fantastic.
Yes.
Let's go. So
Roto Bros endorse this one. They really do. I see. That's the thing, is I endorse Nelson Aguilar as well, but not as much as I do Jacoby Myers, because Jacoby Myers proved to us that he could command an alpha target share. Is he actually that good? I don't know. Am I willing to take that bet or absorb that risk for like a 3rd round rookie pick in a dynasty league? Absolutely. Go ahead. Tell us about Jacoby Myers.
Dude, what's crazy about Jacoby Myers is that he was the wide receiver 1 for the team last year. And then they added the 2 tight ends, they added Nelson Aguilar and whatnot. But like, I don't know if people realize that like most, if not all of his production last year came from week 8 on, or week 7 on, but it was mainly week 8 on. And, he had, and from those basically second half, he had 3 games over double-digit targets. He had that monstrous 12 for 169 game. He had 7 for 111. His only real problem was that he didn't score touchdowns. But I mean, nobody on the New England Patriots scored touchdowns because Cam Newton threw 8. He threw 8 touchdowns. So that's definitely going to be better, I think, this year, because in my opinion, I am probably in the minority of this, but I think that Mac Jones actually will start in week 1, or at least be a lot sooner on the field than what a lot of people expect, because I think Mac Jones is better than Cam Newton. So with Mac Jones in, I think that this is just going to be a much better passing and overall offense than what we saw from the New England Patriots last year. And I think Jacoby Myers could be a huge part of that, because realistically, his only, like we said, his only true competition for being the wide receiver one or in terms of targets and stuff like that is Nelson Aguilar, who was fine for the Vegas Raiders last year. But I think we overall know what Nelson Aguilar is, and I think the Patriots know what he is. Kendrick Bourne, who has been a perennial role player for the San Francisco 49ers. And then Jonnu Smith, who always gets a lot of hype, but has never really translated in terms of getting target volume. And Hunter Henry, who has also just been kind of fine, but also, never really took that next step that I think a lot of people really expected Hunter Henry to do. So Jacoby Myers could realistically get like 120 targets in this offense with Mac Jones, or with the combination of Mac Jones and Cam Newton, and be really, really good for fantasy, especially at his current cost. And that return on investment is going to be fantastic because you can get him as like your wide receiver 6, basically, and he's going to return top, definitely top 40, if not maybe top 30, top 25 type production for you over the course of the 2021 season. So I love Jacoby Myers as like the ultimate late round flyer from New England.
That is a fantastic call. 26.8% targets per route run last year. That was top 30 in the NFL. He was 7th in air yards market share. And he was commanding targets so frequently. He was literally this team's alpha. I don't know where he's going to stand as far as like lifetime value is concerned, but it's really encouraging to me that he was genuinely efficient. He only ran 300 routes, but he was able to give us 60 catches, 730 yards. He didn't score, but I'm team touchdowns are a product of variance. If a receiver doesn't score, I don't take anything from that. If he was efficient with his targets or with his routes run, that is something that I will take. Chris, you talked to me a little bit about Jacoby Myers last week. Talk to me about him in a dynasty sense.
Well, first of all, he's a zero risk flyer. There's zero risk. Like it is the most low risk, maybe high reward thing in fantasy at the receiver spot right now with Jacoby Myers. Because again, not only, and look, we're not saying, nobody on here is saying that Jacoby Myers is going to be, in the season is wide receiver 16, and he's going to be a rock solid wide receiver 2. He's probably going to be in the best case scenario. He's probably going to be in the wide receiver 3 category. Okay. But if you are going, you've got to at least look into putting some stock into at least one New England receiver, right? Because especially when N'Keal Harry's gone, that's one less body that Myers is going to have to worry about. So you've got to look at least one of these guys and just kind of throw a dart and pick who you want to go after as a New England receiver. So do you want to go after a guy who outplayed N'Keal Harry, who I believe he was drafted in the same draft with, who they spent a first round pick, on, mind you, who is probably who is definitely going to be a more volume-based, reliable receiver than Nelson Aguilar. Okay, Jacoby Myers is a guy that is still. You talked about touchdowns. He has never scored. He's never scored a touchdown. So he's still looking for his first career score. Look, that'll come because I think they will score a little bit more than they did last year. I don't know if New England's still going to be all that good, but so we're not going to sit here and pretend that Jacoby Myers is going to be some, great, next fantastic receiver and some alpha dog. He's just not, more than likely, unless Mac Jones, decides to, be Justin Herbert this year and come out and just be the complete truth. But, that's probably not going to happen. So Jacoby Myers is going to be an end of your bench flyer, but you know what? You're going to get him for free. And you can still get him for free right now. So he's going in like wide receiver 80-90 range. So there's no point in not at least buying a little bit of it. He's a bet. I have seen Van Jefferson on people's rosters, and I have seen Anthony Miller on people's rosters. I actually just dropped Van Jefferson for Anthony Miller. The only reason I did that was because Jacoby Myers was not available in free agency in that league. So if you're looking at guys like that and Jacoby Myers is available, Jacoby Myers is the option all day long.
I honestly, the Jacoby Myers call, I think, is the is the call of the podcast. Honestly, I adore that one. We're almost out of time here. Addison, I've got a few questions I kind of want to throw at you really quickly, but before we do that, I want to hear a little bit about Dynasty League Football. What do you guys have going on over there? What do you do for them specifically? Talk to us about DLF.
Yeah, DLF, dynastyleaguefootball.com. It is the premier website and content for Dynasty League. So if you are a diehard Dynasty guy, or even somebody who's just getting into Dynasty, you've been playing redraft and you want to get into this Dynasty thing that you've been hearing about, I think you definitely need to have DLF and its premium subscription in your back pocket. It's absolutely fantastic because the number of writers and analysts that we have at DLF is fantastic. There's content, there's numerous content and articles every single day that's freshly dropped. We're quick on reactions. We have a lot of amazing tools as well. We have a trade finder, which you can literally put in any player's name and it'll pull up recent actual trades that were done in Dynasty Leagues involving that player. We have a trade analyzer as well, which is very easy to use, and you can actually import your league into the Dynasty Trade Analyzer and utilize your actual league in order to make some trades. We have a bunch of other tools as well that are actually like player analytical kind of tools. We have ADP, we have rankings. So all that's fantastic. What I do for DLF mainly is my main focus recently has been actually the YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and type in Dynasty League Football, you can find our channel. We drop content every single day, Monday through Friday. And it's not just me on there. There's some other Dynasty analysts as well from DLF, including Ryan McDowell and the DLF podcast. We got, like I mentioned earlier, Scott and Shane, Manic and Chill. Their show is fantastic. So there's a lot of free content dropping on YouTube as well if you want to listen or watch, as well to supplement your DLF premium subscription and all of the amazing written content and other tools in ADP that you can find on that website. Awesome, man. Where can we find you on Twitter? I don't need to know. I've been following you for years, but where can the listeners follow you on Twitter? At AmazeHayes_. And actually my recent Twitter content for fantasy has been used as an extension of the YouTube channel, because you can post YouTube Shorts, which is a minute-long video, kind of like a TikTok video, but it's for fantasy content. So I post that same exact video that I post on YouTube, also on Twitter. So those have been they've been pretty fun to do, and I like to think that the information is kind of quality as well, because I only have a minute to talk about stuff. So you got to get right to the point and really, make that mark. And I have a pretty recent one that Chris would like on Kyle Pitts as well, and why he's fantastic. So you can go check all those out either on YouTube or on my Twitter at AmazeHayes_. I really liked the one you did on Darrell Henderson. I watched that one, and I got to be honest, it kind of swayed me a little closer to the idea of buying Darrell Henderson and absorbing that upside. All right. Like I said, we're just about out of time, but I really wanted to ask you these final two questions, your final thoughts. 2 questions. I'm going to come at you pretty quickly. Name me your favorite Superflex quarterback to buy this offseason for Superflex Dynasty Leagues. Daniel Jones. And that's probably going to sound really gross, but Daniel Jones is going at an ADP right now where I think that if he were to do something, I still feel like we don't know if he's good or bad, because he's had a revolving door of wide receivers and weapons, and Saquon was hurt all of last year and half of 2019. So with a full cast and crew and an actual alpha wide receiver in Kenny Golladay, I think that Daniel Jones is kind of primed to do a lot better than what a lot of people expect him to do. And if that's the case at his age, he's going to be able to ascend pretty quickly in terms of value and ADP, where you can gain a lot of value. And then if you aren't into it, you can sell whenever he's gained a little bit more value. But it's kind of like that. The total of all the sums that's going on here is getting Saquon Barkley back. They added Kenny Golladay. Whatever Kadarius Toney does can definitely help Daniel Jones for sure. You still got Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard. I think that offense can be better than it was last year for sure, just because he only threw like 11 touchdowns and like twice as many picks. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Daniel Jones is going to be pretty solid overall, and especially that you can get him as your quarterback 3 in Superflex, so you don't need to play him every single week, and you can just stream him whenever you actually need to play him for bye weeks or injuries, or maybe he actually starts and performs pretty well, kind of like what he did in 2019 in his rookie year, where he had multiple 4 touchdown games for you. So I like the buy low on Daniel Jones, just because we're very reactionary on what happened last year, where his like top wide receiver for half the year was like a wide receiver 4 on every other team. It was absolutely atrocious. So I like buying low on Daniel Jones. And again, if you don't like it, buy low now and then sell in like the end of September. Maybe he has a couple of good games, but I like it.
Chris, what do you think about buying Daniel Jones? Chris, you're on mute again.
Muted.
No, keep that in the show. You got to keep that in the show. That's the second time you've done that.
That's the second time I've done it. Look, I love Daniel Jones. He's one of my guys, and Carson Wentz is another one. And it's funny because both of these guys are in, okay, it's time to perform sort of seasons, because both guys have everything around them that they are going to need to succeed. So yeah, I can understand buying really low on Daniel Jones, because you can get him really really cheap, and you can buy him really low, and he's got a lot of guys to work with on that offense, and he's got a very, very high ceiling, I think. So he's got to cut down on the turnovers. That's really his number one thing to work on. I mean, yeah, he's got to be protected, and of course, getting rushed all the time and hurried is not going to help the fact, is never going to help any quarterback turn the ball over less. So they have to continue to protect him. But even if they do, he has got to make sure he is holding on to the football, because the fumbles, they've gotten out of control. And so, but I like that. I like that move. And I've said numerous times, name me an offense from top to bottom on paper that is as loaded as the Giants. There's just not like top to bottom. And I'm not just talking about starters. I'm talking about pure depth. It's insane what's going on there up in New York. So if Daniel Jones can't get it done now, he's never going to be able to do it.
All right, we're going to go out on this. Addison, let me know who your highest owned player across all of your dynasty leagues is.
We already talked about him earlier, but I love him so much. And a lot of the shares that I had of him was already, kind of more whenever I was actually believing in him a couple years ago. But I actually just recently made a trade for him, about a week ago. But it's Robert Woods. And, I talked about how much I love Cooper Kupp as a buy low, but Robert Woods is absolutely fantastic, man. He's been like the most consistent wide receiver on both a weekly and yearly basis over the past couple of years. And he did that with Jared Goff. He now gets a quarterback upgrade to Matthew Stafford. And he's in 100% of my leagues. I own Robert Woods in every single league. Every dynasty league, he is my wide receiver 2, or even actually he's my wide receiver 3. That trade that I made to acquire him last week was super flex. It was Taysom Hill, Will Fuller, Logan Thomas, and a 22 third and fourth for Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. So I really, really like that. And Robert Woods became my wide receiver 3 in that league behind Keenan Allen and Calvin Ridley. So I feel really confident about my abilities to compete and potentially win again as a repeat in that league. But Robert Woods is a 100% player share for me in all my dynasties.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Trey Sermon. I don't think that's, and I actually counted Trey Sermon and Kyle Pitts. I counted before the show because I knew this question was coming. Exactly the same amount of leagues. So the ownership is the same. So it's Kyle Pitts and it's Trey Sermon for me. Javonte Williams just missed the mark, but I'm all over these two guys. So I mean, you guys know my Trey Sermon love and the reasons why. So that's not going to surprise absolutely anybody that Trey Sermon is one of my 2 highest owned players in Dynasty.
We're going to give you a sneak preview of what you're going to hear on the after party. My highest owned player in Dynasty, mic drop. It's Jalen Hurts.
Thanks for listening.
And don't forget to join the Roto Bros Fantasy Advice Lounge on Discord by going to patreon.com/RotoBros.